For my paper on class, I want to focus my main topics around migrants and immigrants within the United States labor force during the 19th and 21st century. Because migrants and immigrants started within the system as lower class and were treated poorly, did this push them to strive for more, and did race play any role for class discrepancies? Despite financial and social hardships, maybe lower class immigrants worked hard to feel comfortable in the communities by forming organizations and groups where people of the same ethnic group could gather and support each other. Race, on the other hand, continues to be a factor for discrimination between classes. Many studies suggest that African American families on the same class level as white families are more inclined to stay in poverty than their counterparts. Many immigrants arrived in the United States from around the world in the 19th century for a number of reasons, but mainly to look for work opportunities. On the East Coast especially, a lot of lower-class immigrants arrived here between 1880 and 1920 due to industrial capitalism. This included a lot of Europeans, Italians, Eastern Europeans who wanted to work in order to send money back to their family. All of this helped build communities, towns, and really helped the United States thrive on immigration. During this time, they formed vibrant organizations and societies, such as Italian workmen's clubs, Eastern European Jewish mutual aid societies, and Polish Catholic churches, to ease the transition to their new American home. Immigrant communities published newspapers in dozens of languages and purchased spaces to maintain their arts, languages, and traditions alive. And from these foundations they facilitated even more immigration. After staking out a claim to some corner of American life, they wrote home and encouraged others to follow them over. This was called chain migration. Despite not having many resources in order to be successful, the lower-class immigrants that landed here within the time succeeded on such a level that they told their families to follow suit. This would be an indication that the immigrant mentality only pushed them to strive for greatness than to be lower class. The Great Depression would be a time of great struggle for certain Americans, but maybe the migrants more than anyone. Not only were they looking for a better life and enough work to feed a family, but they were subjected to extreme hatred for wanting to contribute. Between 1929 and 1939, during the early 30s, extreme droughts led more than 440,000 people in Oklahoma alone to be pushed west in an attempt to look for new work or to start growing crops. Class wars became an integral part of how people feared migrants settling within their state borders. This became evident because in the winter of 1935 to 1936, California, Florida, and Colorado established border blockades. A billboard outside of Tulsa, Oklahoma even read, "No jobs in California, keep out." The experience of the Great Depression. The way in which the people in the Great Depression were treated has a strong correlation to those Eastern Europeans who arrived on the East Coast in the 19th and early 20th century. As I mentioned earlier, the Europeans created communities and created opportunities. As evidence suggested from the government blockades, the middle and high classes on the West Coast were maybe worried about the same thing happening to them during the Great Depression. The Great Depression was particularly hard on non-white Americans. As African American pensioner told interviewer Studs Terkel, the Negro was born in depression. It didn't mean too much to him. The Great American Depression only became official when it hit the white man. Black workers were generally the last hired when businesses expanded production, and the first fired when businesses experienced downturn. In 1932, with the national unemployment average hovering around 25%, black unemployment reached as high as 50%, while even black workers who kept their jobs saw their already low wages cut dramatically. I think that over time, if you look at the opportunities that white migrants had in particular managed to gain for themselves during the last 100 years since the Great Depression, they managed to eventually break through the caste barriers. This started happening in the mid-1940s with lots of housing developments happening in areas in suburban places outside of the city, such as Long Island. But when it started to happen and white people moved into the middle class, non-white people were left in poverty and lower class situations. With all this wealth that was created, boom, and filled through the social structures with built-in privileges and prejudices, just when many middle and working class white Americans' families begin their journey of upward mobility by moving to the suburbs with the help from the government programs such as the FHA and GI Bill, many African American workers and other racial minorities found themselves systematically shut out. In the modern day, we are definitely in different time as a country, economically and technological. There are different obstacles today than there were then. I think one of the biggest issues today is that of minority and race. In today's society, you still have a 1 in 4 chance of being poor if you're a single black parent, opposed to a 1 in 10 chance if you're white. I think the issue surrounding race doesn't always play a role within poor society, but as years have gone on, people who identify as white have managed to rise above issues such as the Great Depression with some ease, whereas African Americans and other minorities still face struggle. Thank you.